2007 Nissan Xterra. Issue is the engine light comes on, and when you scan it, full system scan, we get a P1731 in the transmission control module, automatic transmission, first engine braking. So this data I've already ran through with the Autel, the factory scan tool program for Nissan. But description, it's a fail-safe function to prevent sudden decrease in speed by engine brake other than at the one position. Customer complaint is when they're driving, it'll shift at higher RPMs. I think it's from first to second. Can't remember exactly, but I believe it's from first to second it's shifting. I troubleshot this one, I don't know, a few months ago. Never put it on film, but it was pretty easy to troubleshoot as far as the scan tool diagnostics. You go in, you read the live data, you go through this little fault isolation chart. You know, of course, take it with a grain of salt, but onboard diagnostic logic tells you all the stuff. So when the TCM does not receive the proper voltage signal from the sensor, when the TCM monitors each ATF pressure, which is automatic transmission, fluid pressure switch, and solenoid monitor value, and detects an irregular when engine brake first gear acts as other than one position. Possible causes: harness or connectors, the sensor circuit is open or shorted, low coast brake solenoid valve or ATF pressure switch 2, which all this stuff, these bottom two, the low coast brake solenoid valve and the ATF pressure switch 2, are inside the transmission because the valve body in TCM, transmission control module, is inside the transmission. So I went through all these procedures. It failed it. It comes back every time for that fault. But what it wants you to do is, actually I'll show you this. So you pull off the pan. Before you do that, you can drain the fluid with this plug. Pull off the pan. There's your valve body with your TCM. It goes on the transmission. That's what we got to get to right there. See what's going on. Here's the pin out going into the transmission. We already checked that, power and grounds. Here's your that's park neutral switch. We don't need that for this. This is your CAN bus, which I've worked on the Nissan Frontier that had CAN bus issues. Not this one though. Then this is your power and ground, which we checked going into the tranny's good. And then here's all your service data specifications for that transmission, which we'll need eventually. But if I go back right here, here's your TCM and the park neutral switch, fluid temperature sensor, different sensors in here. This is the park neutral switch. But anyways, what I want to look for, we'll get into that more when we get down to the transmission, into the schematics and all that, is they had known issues with these vehicles. That there's the radiator up front, obviously, coolant flows through it. Transmission cooler lines go through the, go from the transmission up to the radiator, and it's partitioned in the radiator. Well, what could happen is, I'm not saying this is an issue with this one, but those partitions break down. Something goes wrong inside the radiator and basically pumps antifreeze into the transmission, and it ruins the TCM, or the electrical connectors. So we got to get to this guy. We don't know if that's the case, but we got to drain the fluid, pull the pan, look at the TCM. A couple ways you can fix it. You can get a new TCM. You have to have a J2534 pass-through device to reprogram it. I can't find any aftermarket ones for these TCMs. They're out there, but they're all sold out. I think it's a very common issue with these, including the Nissan Frontiers around these years. Another way you can do it is you can actually go in there and take this apart, look at the solder joints, which we're going to do, and maybe, you know, hopefully can do a repair on them, and then do some micro soldering and fix these, and then you don't have to reprogram that TCM. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drain the fluid. Well, if I pull this plug off, this fluid is nasty. It's brown. Look at that. It is, looks like mud. It's not even red. It's just like a dark brown. It is completely nasty. So we're going to drain the fluid into this fluid balser, but look how nasty that stuff is. So we're draining the fluid right here. Evan's going to help, right? Get this fluid all drained out. and then we'll go ahead and pop all these pan bolts off to get to the TCM. Here's the plug, brass washer on it. But yeah, I can't believe how nasty and brown that stuff is. So we'll pause it from here and get this fluid drained out and then pull the pan. All right, we got the tranny pan off. You can see it's all milky and brown. We got to pull this filter off here, and then we got to pull out. So the electrical connector, I can't tell this. Gotta get up in there. Right there's the electrical connector that goes into the tranny. We got to pull this valve body off, and then get the TCM. After we get the valve body off, the filter, the valve body, and get to the TCM and check all those connectings. But if you look in here, this fluid, it's all milky and brown. That's the tranny fluid. It looks nasty. It looks like chocolate milk. So I believe there may be, I'm not saying it there is, but highly suspect there's cross-contamination going on. So we'll continue to disassemble. All right, so now I'll show you the service data again here. So we took off the pan, the gasket. Now we got to take off the valve body, which is showing index 4, control valve with TCM. So that's the valve body with the transmission control module. We'll pull that off next. We got Steve making eggs and bacon over here. See? A little cheese on, can you put a little more cheese on there? We got fresh snow outside. That's where the geese have been landing. Evan's helping, right, buddy? We'll go ahead and pull that apart now. All right, we got the valve body off. Bunch of different bolts, different lengths, but you can see up in there where the electrical connector comes in, how foamy and nasty it is right there. Right, so that's, you see it's still dripping. We're gonna let this thing drip out, clean all this up. But if you look up here on the valve body, with the TCM, this whole thing's the valve body, all your solenoids, your TCM's this, but look at all that nasty stuff right there. Definitely got a contamination issue. So what we're going to do now is we're going to clean that part of the vehicle up. We're going to clean this TCM and valve body up. We're going to disassemble it once we get all organized and see what electrical connections. We'll do some, circuit integrity checks and see what needs to be done. At the dealer, they just replaced this entire assembly, which is, $1,300 or $1,500, and you got to program it with a pass-through device. But we can take it apart and find a problem. Check the circuits, check the solenoids, check the connections once we get the TCM off of that. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. And then we got to get a new radiator, flush this entire system out, and then go from there. All right, so you got that pretty much cleaned up. We got to flush all this out still. But still dripping. We still got a lot of cleaning to do, but as far as getting it all flushed out, cleaning. And then you go over to the valve body. We're going to go ahead and pull the TCM apart, look at it, but here's your main connector that goes in right here. 10 connections. There's your 10 pinouts there. It tells you what the wires and what you should have, like your power supplies, your CAN high, your K line, your ground, your power supply, backup, CAN low, starter relay, and ground. Then it goes through these modules, through the module, and I take all this apart and clean all this up and see what we can do to fix this. So before we go ahead and pull this TCM out, transmission control module, off the valve body, which is one of our main issues for the circuit code we're having, I wanted to look in the radiator, and I pulled the cap off, and obviously there's your cross contamination. Look at that stuff, right? Tranny fluid getting into the that's the bolts from the valve body. Tranny fluid getting into the or coolant rather, getting into the tranny fluid. So you can see all this foam, and you can see how dark the fluid was. It even started causing little pitting on the pan inside because there's moisture in there, 50% water, 50% coolant. But definitely, it's cross-contaminating, coolant in the tranny fluid and tranny fluid in the coolant, right? Because here's your radiator, holds this, and then you got two tranny lines, pressure and return, that come from the tranny that go into the partition in this radiator, that and then the partition breaks down and cross-contaminates. So we got to get a new radiator, flush all that out, flush the transmission out, fix the valve body, like I said. Hopefully we can do some micro soldering to fix that when we find the problem. Because the new module, this whole assembly the dealer puts in, it's like $1,300 to $1,500 with plus, you know, the programming. You can get one aftermarket, like I said, $700 to $800. Just nobody has them in stock. You still got to program them with a J2534 pass-through, but yeah, I just wanted to show you that on film that it's definitely a cross-contamination issue. So go ahead and pull the TCM off the valve body. So I put that cap back on, but I did want to show in the reservoir tank here. I don't know if you can really see it in the film, but this is the antifreeze overflow tank. But look at all the stuff built, scaling and stuff built up in there. It's kind of hard to tell with this. Can't get my light in there. If I go like that, if it focuses there. Yeah, look at all that. That's supposed to be antifreeze, but that's tranny fluid and antifreeze in there. So definitely got to clean that out and replace that, or, you know, figure that out. But we'll go ahead and rip the TCM apart. Before we go ahead and take that off, the TCM off the valve body to fix that, I just want to show you guys, these are the tranny cooler lines. There's a pressure and a return here. They go into the tranny, and then they go up. Grab this right here. They go up, can't really see it, but they go up into the radiator up in here where they partitioned at. So those are the lines that are crossing everything over, contaminating, because the partition in the radiator is bad. So we'll go ahead and rip this apart. Alrighty, we pulled the valve body apart. You have to pull off the solenoids, so we took all the Allen head screws out. Problem is, about half of these things broke coming out. This broke. Why? Usually they just pop out, but when you have cross-contamination, there's corrosion in there. It slows the O-ring, and these things are literally stuck in there. So you got to, if we can even salvage this, we got to take it apart. The complete valve body, that's what's left here is the valve body, and your switch here and some electrical connectors. And these right here are your pressure switch ports. All those right there. So we got to take that apart so we can get those cleaned up. But here's the actual computer, or the TCM, transmission control module. On the back, here's all your pressure switches. So what we got to do is take this guy apart, see if we can salvage it, and salvage this. A lot of guys in the field out there, it seems like they're just replacing, what I can find is replacing this whole module, because there is contamination everywhere in this TCM, everywhere in the engine, everywhere in the transmission. So we'll continue to rip it apart. All right, so we tore it apart some more. I got this cover off. Got to be careful. You see some jeweler's screwdrivers, and it pops off. But look at all this corrosion on these wires traces. It's supposed to look like this. It's all corroded. Now, these are your pressure switches, your solenoid connectors here. We didn't see nothing that was obviously broken, but what we want to do now is we want to find the low coast brake solenoid valve and the ATF pressure switch 2, which one of these is the ATF pressure switch 2, and one of these traces. We want to trace it back, check continuity through this whole entire circuit, get down to this, maybe it's in there, pin retention or excessive corrosion, or it's in these harnesses. But obviously this thing it's destroyed. I mean, we may be able to salvage this thing, but it's looking like more than likely it needs a new TCM with the valve body. So we still got to pull these stuck ones out. It also could be one of these solenoids that's bad as well. But look at all the corrosion on these soldered boards, these traces. This is the TCM. So we'll see what we can do there. And we're going to have to figure out the next plan of attack as far as troubleshooting this. We got to get some good service data as of what solenoid is what, and what ATF pressure switch is what, reverse engineer it, and start probing through the circuitry and go from there. So the code that they're getting is a P1731, but it is more, it's sporadic, but it's coming up more and more the more they drive it. Now, if it was actually a broken circuit, one of these traces were broken to the pressure switch or the solenoid, you would have a hard fault, right? But my belief is there's all this corrosion, and it could be the pin retention, you know, from these pressure switches or the solenoids going back into these little, I guess you can call them EPROMs or modules, for the TCM. So, you know, pin retention, corrosion with all that antifreeze and water in there is causing this issue, and it's obviously doing a ton of damage. It's only going to get worse. So, like I said, we'll go through and troubleshoot it and determine if we can fix this, clean it up, or like most places do, is they put a new TCM with a, you know, valve body and do the updated design, along with, you know, flushing it out, the tranny, the radiator, the engine, a new a new radiator as well. So take a look at that. All right, continuing the troubleshoot. This cap just slides off. You got to be careful. But look at all that crap, antifreeze and tranny fluid mixed in there. There's all your pins that go down to your module. That's nasty. We got to clean all that up. Check continuity. Like I said, I don't think nothing's hard broke, because we'd have a code all the time. I just think that there's it's an issue with, you know, with all that corrosion in there and pin retention. Not even pin retention, I guess all the corrosion and not making good connections through this. So we'll continue to troubleshoot some more. Went ahead and pulled the other one. Same situation. Just nasty looking. This side over here looks a lot nastier than this side, which is that clip compared to that clip. So a lot worse compared to that one. So we'll clean up and start checking our circuits. So I did some more cleaning. Part of this is a coating on these solder traces as well, but what we want to do is check these pressure switches. The code that we have, it says ATF pressure switch 2, or low coast brake solenoid valve, or harness or connectors circuit is open or shorted. But that is pressure switch 2, that one right there. So we can check one side to the ground case, the other side coming through the tracers, going up to these pins to the EEPROM, the computer. And then the other side, when this guy sits like this solenoid here, the second one from the back, is the, yeah, that one right there is the low coast brake solenoid valve. So I want to check those two terminals going through the circuitry on this. Now, we did some initial checks. I didn't see nothing broken. Continuity was good, but honestly, I believe with all the stuff on there, tranny fluid, water, the water and the antifreeze, that it was basically shorting it all together. They try to kind of keep this thing sealed. You can see the silicone there, but yeah, I believe that's what's going on with the connections. All that water and antifreeze, you know, the glycol antifreeze transferring electrons and all that. So how do I know those are the solenoids? Because there's a pretty good article out there. They're saying that's the low coast brake solenoid valve, or low coast pressure switch 2 is that one. Some good information in this article. I don't know who those guys are, but those are the input speed sensors. So right there. This is an older article, but then it talks about, you know, number 2 is the low coast brake solenoid. So that article is right here. The focus is pretty good article. Oh, come on, there we go. Well, why isn't it not focused? There we go. So, pretty good article on this transmission, how it all works and everything. So, talks about a lot of, you know, different stuff. How, you know, how it controls it. So, pretty good article for these guys here. This is just by Lance Wiggins. Seems like pretty good, very in-depth, so that'll definitely help us troubleshoot this as far as how it works. So what we're going to do now is clean it up some more, do some more testing, and then that'll be it for this part 1 of this transmission. Part 2, we'll go over about what we did to fix it, what we're going to do as far as the transmission, get the new radiator, get everything flushed out and put back together and do its drivability tests.